The Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you've joined us wherever you are. You can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org, where you can see all the full interviews, these great guests, wonderful people. We also break up those interviews into what we call power clips, and so you can kind of see some of the great moments. But we've been so grateful to see so many of you joining us there. You can also find us on the social media platforms. You know, Good Life TV is about the good stuff, and our goal here is to inspire, to encourage, to honor, to empower. And so we're focusing on the good. You get to choose what you dwell on. And so right here we're trying to dwell on the good. And we have a great guest today. I'm so excited to have him. Tim Sherreitt is with me. Tim is the regional director of South Ventura County for Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which we're going to talk about. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Born and raised Southern California, Mission Viejo, an Orange County kid like myself.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about kind of your family growing up and where you came from.
Oh, I was raised in a home that just loved Jesus. I was privileged to have parents that weren't perfect, but really emulated what it means to follow Christ. I have two brothers, and we are very close in age, so there was a built-in competition, which is a built-in sport in many ways,
right,
which we all love to do is play sports, and mine was soccer. Loved soccer, played through high school, but every sports career comes to an end.
Right.
So, but in that process of life, just growing up, the thing that always struck me was, the Bible always just came alive. And so as I was loving sports, I was always loving the scriptures. And so as FCA sort of started showing itself in my life, that was like the roots of who I am. It seemed to make a lot of sense in this arena that God just brought into my world.
And so tell us a little about your vocational path. I know you went to seminary, you pastored for a period of time, and then you were kind of called into the work you're doing now. But walk us through a little bit of that story.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the Cliff Note version because there's so much there. But I served as a pastor on pastoral staff for 16 years, and many different levels. But that was really my focus. I was a graduate of Cal Poly SLO. As I was leaving that, really felt like the Lord was putting on my heart the desire to be in full-time ministry, but wanted to test the waters first, so got an internship at a church in the Bay Area. Served there for 2 years, and that really kind of confirmed a lot in my heart, so I went into seminary at Talbot. Loved my time at Talbot. The professors were fantastic. Felt like I learned a lot. God confirmed a lot in my heart. And then the next step just kind of keep presenting themselves. Served at a church for 7 years in Diamond Bar. Before that, Eva Free Fullerton Church in Fullerton.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there for 3 years.
Oh, really?
Yep. And then moved up here, or actually to the Thousand Oak area in 2014.
Being a pastor is a tough job.
Yeah, I you know, one thing I have walked away from that experience, or those years of experiences, and I am never going to throw another pastor under the bus. It is a hard role. Yeah. And even if you don't agree with the decision they made, for whatever reason, on some kind of practical level,
right,
man, they are shouldering a lot of voices.
Yes.
And so, man, I just always come to their defense, like, let's just...
Right, I'm with you.
Let's come around them.
I'm a pastor's son, so
there you go.
I get it.
Yeah.
I've read, I think that it's maybe like in the top 3 most challenging jobs that you can have, you know, as an occupation. But so it's not easy. So you pastored, and then you ended up taking this role with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Yep. What drew you to that, and what kind of drew you to Fellowship of Christian Athletes in general?
You know, that is a very hard one to answer, and the reason is because I wasn't necessarily trying to leave the church, but the Lord just sort of, and the best way to put it is put circumstances along the way that was a natural transition from one to the next. And it's a little convoluted. There were some challenges at the church. There was some opportunity with FCA. There was stuff happening in my family, in the home. In that same time period of 2018, my in-laws moved in with us because my mother-in-law had a stroke. And so they became unable to care for themselves. So we brought them into our home. That was a whole change of culture in the house, no doubt. At the same time, there was just struggles of sorting through next steps with the church, and felt like I was in a spot where the combination of those challenges, I needed some space to attend to my home. I needed some space to deal with what's taking place there. And so pulled away from that and started really praying about what the landscape looks like next. In that process, I was talking to some friends and stuff, and one of them mentioned FCA. And again, going back to what I mentioned before, there was sports, gospel, it's like the perfect marriage, really I think for any career path, but especially for mine. So started knocking on that door a bit, and really through the process, again, this could be a long story, but the process of it all, the Lord just really confirmed this was the next step through peace in my heart, through opportunities with conversations with people, and then through the challenging process of fundraising. You know, as a husband of 3 kids, right, mortgage and all, with in-laws living there, you think about that part of it all.
Right.
And as you jump into this new arena, God has confirmed so much by allowing that process to be perhaps easier than most people experience. So that was really just confirming.
Yeah, those decisions are hard.
They are.
Those transitions when you're a dad and the responsibilities on your shoulders, that's a challenging thing. It's not
you
easy.
feel it.
You do feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there. For somebody who's watching this who's never heard of Fellowship of Christian Athletes, how do you introduce kind of what it is, the vision for it?
Yeah, the vision is to see the world transformed by Jesus Christ through the influence of coaches and athletes. That's the most general, basic statement we can say. On a day-to-day basis, that could be nuanced in different ways. Mm-hmm. But so I tell our student leaders who are working, which is one component of this whole thing. So maybe I'll back up here a bit. In the pursuit of that, there are athletes, there are coaches, and then I would say there's also churches. Again, coming from the church, I believe that the church is still God's number one plan. We are not replacing that in any way. Mm-hmm. And so we want to get people in fellowship with Jesus and in fellowship with his people in a local church. Mm-hmm. So we work with and through coaches, we work with and through athletes, and we work through and with churches.
Okay.
For the goal of bringing people into relationship with Jesus Christ and then also his church. So that would be, again, still about a 10,000 foot view of it all.
Yeah.
But that gives a little bit of an idea.
And then you set up kind of chapters in schools?
So people think it's a high school or a college ministry, and it's not, though that's a natural expression for all of us, because schools provide an environment where there's a predictive calendar that everybody seems to be on. At high school, everyone has the same lunch period. You can predict that, so you can get a large group of people together in that. After school, there's sports that happen, same time every day, so you can predict it. There's no other environment in life that is that predictable. You know that in the church, because it's hard to get 3 or 4 families together because all their schedules are different. Right. But in a school, you can do it.
That's a good point.
So it's an easy place to start the grassroots of it all. So that's where it finds its kind of first groundings in any society. But we also want to get into the local youth sports, club sports, but those are a bit more challenging, again, because of the unpredictability and of the different schedules.
Right. I was thinking about your life. I mean, and I think it's wonderful you have that grounding from your upbringing. You were raised, you said, by parents who love God.
Yeah.
Have you thought about what your life would be like if you didn't have God? It's kind of a wild question, but...
Yeah, you know, I don't really understand, and maybe because of my angle, but even still, I think the Bible makes this point also, but I don't understand how people weather life without the confidence that there is a God that is for them, that there's a God who not only is for them, but has done an incredible demonstration in the life, death, resurrection of Jesus, right? Demonstrating the extent of his love. So I mean, with all the stuff that went on in our world in 2018, you know, there was I started feeling depressed, a bit lost at times. You know, that identity had been wrapped up in a profession, and it was almost in that sense in which God brought me back into. Tim, I am your identity. And I got to tell you, that journey, as hard as it was so important because, and you know this, but when your identity is wrapped up in your profession or your accolades or whatever it may be, those things are so volatile. Yeah, so futile. And right. so your emotions and your confidence is all over the map.
Yeah.
So I just look to that season and go, man, God, thank you for almost taking some things away and restructuring even my own heart toward you, because there's just more of a rest no matter what may come. I still have a long ways to go for sure, but that was just a really important season for me. So
sounds like pruning.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, yeah.
Pruning's good. It hurts a little at the time.
You know, I've decided no one would ever choose. If he says, I'll prune you and you'll be better later on, would you want it? You'd probably still say no, and you realize what the process was.
Yeah, right.
So he just takes you through it regardless.
Yeah, right.
And then you're thankful for it afterwards.
Right, exactly right.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I mean, we've been through suffering just like everybody. Yeah. And I don't understand. It's hard for me to picture. But, you know, Kirk Cameron was here. He was telling the story, which I've told several times since because I think it's so powerful. He was talking about somebody got a cancer diagnosis, and they had to go tell their mother. It was a relatively young person, I think. And so she sat down with her mother to tell her about this really bad diagnosis. And the mother's response was, "Isn't it amazing that before the beginning of time, God knew we were going to be sitting right here having this conversation about this scary thing, you know, whatever." You know, that is just incredible.
Yeah.
You know, to think about the sovereignty of God, how big He is. Yeah. He's not surprised by pandemics. Yeah. He's not surprised by transitions. He's not. Which just is an amazing comfort.
Oh my goodness. People want to throw out the sovereignty of God because of all of these things, and I just say how it is that sovereignty that gives you just rest in the middle of it. You know, no matter how bad it gets, the one thing I always know is they can't take away the most important. They can take away my health, my life, my family, and all these things, my reputation and stuff, but really they've taken nothing.
Yeah, right.
Because this is not my prize.
Right.
And I got to keep reminding myself of that. My prize is in Christ and what's to come. Like that is my inheritance.
Right.
But once I reorient that, then my heart starts to calm down in the midst of the chaos.
Yes.
So I am so on the same page with you
so
on that.
Good.
Yeah.
That's so
absolutely.
Good. And you know, kids, one of the things I appreciate about what you guys do, you know, it's rough these days for kids, for young people, finding their way. Obviously, the pandemic, throw that on top of it, but just even without that, you know, these days of competition and where do I stand, and you know, pressures, fears. Fear is such a big one, which was amplified by this pandemic. I mean, I think we saw fear rise, but it must be a wonderful thing for you to experience being able to be in there. I guess you call them huddles. Being able to be in the huddle with young people who are at such important ages and such important points in their life. What's that like?
You know what? It's I want to say it's an honor, which is so cliche to say that, but you know, we just had a weekend retreat with 40 of our student leaders up in Ojai, Forest Home. And just watching those students. So I was having dinner and I was watching over to the table, and 4 students were talking about, you know, their campus and how they're all from different schools, but what they're going to do on their campus, and that led them then to just praying in that moment for the next 15 minutes, holding hands and praying for their campus and their peers and stuff. I mean, that's the honor, to get to watch God do amazing things through students. See, when I was in high school, I wasn't leading any charges. I wasn't leading any gospel pursuits on the campus and stuff. But these students are. And so I feel very honored to be a part of such incredible people with those leaders. But then when you think about at an average huddle at one of our 8 public high schools, even those Christian, there's a lot of kids who go there that don't know Jesus. About half of the people, the students who show up into one of those huddles, have no connection to a church, have no background in religion. So they're there either trying to see if Christianity is as bigoted and stereotypical as media says it is, or they're there because they just want free pizza, or for whatever reason, they're just there and they're watching and seeing. what an amazing, when I was a pastor, I remember thinking probably 90% of you in here, if not more, have grown up in the church. This is where we got to get the gospel to.
Right.
And your peers are doing a better job than we are, inviting them to this place. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
In that regard. Yeah.
And there's a genius about sports. I'm really into sports. Our kids are pretty into sports. Yeah. What is it about sports that's great in terms of our growth and maturity and process as a person? What is it about sports that is great?
Well, for one, it's physical. Like for kids, they are just physical. They are physical creatures. As we get older, we set aside the physical stuff and we go to more cerebral because our bodies are getting tired. But their relationships are built around physicality, doing things, building things, body experience. And so there's far more families and students and kids who are engaging in sports than there are in just, say there's an art class. Kids don't jump into art class till they get later on, right? Mm-hmm. So sports already from the get-go becomes sort of one of the first team experiences kids get to have. There's a common goal, there's a common pursuit in those things, there's a coach, there's a team, all these things, there's families are jumping in, the families on the team. So you have like buy-in from a very early age. And that right there is huge because that's the first really level in which people engage community, and it seems like 5 years old, they're getting into sports. They might go to a preschool, but there's no team dynamic there. They're just top down. But here they're working on a team. And I think that partnership, whether kids can put words to that or not, is immensely important and immensely powerful. Yeah. Because that's what the Christian life is. I mean, the bridge from one to the next is huge. It's a team sport. You have instructors, teachers, you have pastors, people come alongside, you have peers, iron sharpening iron. It is what Paul uses to describe really what Christian life is. And so because the metaphor is so strong, it's a huge and powerful platform to actually engage in the scriptures on. Not to mention the fact, and this is sort of my opinion, but I think it's based upon just evidence, but sports would say is in some ways the religion of our culture. If you just survey the average household around here, you'd probably get about, at least in our years, 333,000 people in the area that I am responsible to develop FCA in. And of those 333,000 people, about 10% are a part of a local, I would call it a solid biblical church. And that's not even every week. That'd be like on a once-a-month basis. You know, they would be involved in that, about 10 to 11%. About half of the area, 49%, we did a study on this, 49% at that time were a part of some religious institution somewhere of some kind, or at least identified with one of those. That means 51% didn't have an identification at all. But about 65 to 70% are involved in a sport.
Really?
Family-wise. Now, obviously, parents are not, but their kids are in a sport, which so if you go to any local sports field, and if you talk to any pastor, the biggest competition with Sunday or midweek attendance, it's not art class, right? It's not the theater, it's sports.
Right, that's true.
That's where the families are at, and they're spending thousands of dollars for their kid to have the best training. They're on, if it's push come to shove on a Sunday morning there's a tournament going on somewhere, or there's a practice the coach is called, guess who wins, the coach or the church? Well, the coach wins in that season.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's telling.
Yeah.
Right? That there is a huge platform. This is where people go to worship, whether they call it that or not. And if you were to say then who's the pastors of those environments? It's the coaches.
Yeah. Right.
And so I tell pastors all the time, you've got to be, instead of competing with the sports field, although you do want to call people to a right perspective of life and what idolatry is and so forth. You want to have a right, but you also want to be empowering the coaches in your congregation, not shaming them. Not saying, hey, shame on you for being there, saying, hey, since you're there, there's a platform you have, an opportunity you have to be pastoral and bring people who will never show up into the church, the gospel of Jesus in a winsome way.
It's a good point. Yeah, sports is a wonderful thing. It's a bad God, but it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the scripture uses that, that running the race analogy. I always think about, why did they, why is that there? Why is it framed as a race? Kind of a marathon, which is interesting because that's kind of sports, And yet that's what the analogy is. I've pondered that a little bit. Like that.
I wonder part of it, again, I'm just speculating here because I haven't really thought into that, but again, because sports, everybody, whether like everyone, I identify with sports. That was my identity growing up. I love sports. Some other community say I love music and stuff, but even the musician probably played a sport for a season. So everybody seems to have an experience in that. So when you use that analogy, everybody understands
Gets it. That's true.
But if you use a musical one, I'm like, I've never
right picked up a guitar.
Wrong one. I mean, it doesn't connect.
Right. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. So in terms of people that partner with you, so you're supported by churches, I hope.
It's a mixed bag. You know, what we don't want to do is we don't want to be panhandlers of the people we're serving.
Right.
So we try very hard. If we're serving a coach who also has a side business, we don't want to then say, hey, why don't you support us? We want to tread very carefully on those, right? Because we're here to serve you. And even the church, we're here to serve you. We want to see you guys win. Our win is your win. And so, but there's also you guys are supporting mission organizations to reach the gospel.
This is one.
If you feel like this is actually accomplishing that, would you contribute part or a portion of that into this?
Yeah.
And again, there's no difference of treatment because a church does or doesn't. It's just, we'll oftentimes say, if this is up, the Lord feels like He's leading you in this direction, then this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Do you have events, golf tournaments, or anything like that people?
FCA is an international organization, right? So, but it's like a local church. This area, I'm responsible for this area, and so I, with my board, would put on the events for fundraising and
for
stuff.
this area.
But there are golf tournaments in different areas that they've leveraged. Me being new to this, and this area, at least the area I'm in, the Ventura County, has largely been underdeveloped for many years. So it hasn't had a consistency of leadership.
Okay.
But that's been, over the past 7-8 years, my predecessor, Dan Coffin, did a fantastic job. God moved him out into another role somewhere. I stepped in. But those are probably the 7-8 years have been more consistent leadership, and we're starting to see the base of trust build. Mm-hmm. And so then you can start doing more events where people go, yeah, I know that. Okay, I'll invite a friend into that.
Right.
So we're hoping to be able to build that reputation and build the confidence of what we're doing.
Yeah.
In that way.
What's the website?
VenturaCountyFCA.org.
VenturaCountyFCA.org.
If you just type in FCA Ventura County, it'll be the first one that pops up. Yeah.
It's exciting stuff what you're doing. Congrats on the new role, and
thank you.
And the youth are really important. And that's a great point about coaches. I hadn't thought about that. I know I've known coaches are significant, but I mean that's a really huge opportunity that they have. I
don't know how much time we have, but can I give you a story?
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep everyone nameless in this, so whatever. But there's a coach, and I won't even say the sport, just so there's no. But there's a coach, head coach of a. I may have to go into the sport of a school, and I was having lunch with this coach, and this coach loves Jesus, is good at what he does, but he was saying, hey, I was looking to get involved at my church and taking on a certain ministry at my church. And I said to him, which one? That'd be awesome. And he's telling me all about it. And I said, you know what? Now this is where the name of the sport. He's the head coach of a football program at a public high school. And I said, you know what? I love the fact that you want to be involved in your church. As a former pastor, I never want to discourage anybody from serving their local body at all, or even leading the charge local body. I said, but you are one of 8 guys or individuals who have one of the most coveted sports coaching position in our area. You have 100 student athletes out there, the largest youth group in our area.
Right.
You have 8 assistant coaches, the largest youth staff in our area. And 90% of your players aren't going to a church anywhere. You go to your youth program, and about 9% are coming from that church, 10% are not.
Right.
Total flip and a switch. I would hate for you to expend all of your pastoral energy in an environment that somebody else can easily do in replacement of this one that I don't want you to be replaced by.
Right.
I want you to stay here and take advantage.
It's a really good point.
And he was like, it's a good point. So let me think about that. Talked to him about 6 months later. And we're getting lunch and talking. And he was just saying, hey, I didn't take that role. But he started telling me stories of the students driving home. This guy has 2 little kids. Like, he's a young dad. But he's driving home, and as a young dad, you're thinking, I got my family there, better be there quick. But he sees a student, his football player, one of them walking home, and he thought, I should pick him up and see if he needs a ride. So he did. He stopped, pulled over, and on that 5-minute ride, he asked the students, so are your parents just not able to pick you up? And he goes, well, my foster parents both work. And he's like, oh, you're part of the foster system. So we got to start asking questions on that, right? And they talked for 5 minutes. And this kid just started sharing about his different families he's lived in and so forth. And the coach just shared with me, he's like, I would have never known like that kid's story if I hadn't stopped. He said, did you know that half of my players come from broken homes? And he's like, I'm like, dude, what an amazing opportunity you have.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So, I mean, to be the dad figure that many of them don't have, but to be the right dad figure, because many kids have dads, but they don't have a good dad figure.
Right.
They're not following Jesus. They're not showing humility of Christ in their homes or even as they approach their kids. But here's a coach that gets to demonstrate that. And I bet my belief is over the course of this next year or two, I mean, he's going to have some stories of kids who ask him, hey, you say you're a Christian, I want to know more about that.
Yeah. What a great
so,
story. That's huge. Huge opportunity.
Yeah.
This is wonderful. Congrats. Thanks for what you're doing.
No, thank you for letting me be here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. See you next time.